What if the key to true happiness and lasting wealth isn't found outside of you, but deep within? Imagine unlocking a secret so simple, yet so profound that, by focusing quietly on yourself and embracing silence, your life could transform beyond anything you've ever imagined. Ready to discover how stillness can lead you to your greatest success? True understanding and clarity come not from the external noise that surrounds us, but from the stillness we cultivate within. In a world that constantly demands attention, reaction, and participation, silence becomes a radical act of self-connection. Most people live with a constant background noise, opinions, beliefs, criticisms, and comparisons all create a mental storm that drowns out the subtle, authentic voice of the soul. In silence, however, that voice becomes audible. When we turn away from distractions and choose stillness, we do not become empty. On the contrary, we become full of thoughts that are our own, full of emotions we've long buried, full of intuitions we've ignored. Silence doesn't erase the chaos, it reveals it. And in that revelation lies an opportunity to face ourselves fully, without masks, without pretense, without performance. We are not what the world says we are. We are something far deeper, but we can only hear that truth when everything else quiets down. This is why silence is not simply the absence of sound, it is the presence of awareness. It is an active state, not a passive one. When you sit in silence, you are not doing nothing. You are listening to the body, to the breath, to the whisper of your deeper self. But once we give space to silence, we begin to hear a direction from within. This inner direction is never loud or forceful. It is quiet, but powerful. It speaks in symbols, in feelings, in flashes of knowing. And the more we practice silence, the more fluent we become in its language. Moreover, silence exposes our distractions for what they truly are: talk, avoidance mechanisms. We fill our days with talk, entertainment, obligations, not always because we enjoy them, but because we fear what we might find in the quiet. And though this can be uncomfortable, it is also profoundly healing. Silence becomes a mirror, showing us not only who we are, but who we are not. In that mirror, we begin to distinguish between what is real and what is conditioned. We learn which desires are ours and which were imposed by others. We learn to separate our true voice from the corners of borrowed beliefs. And in that clarity we discover freedom. A person who knows themselves through silence is not easily manipulated. They are grounded. Their peace comes from a deeper place, unshaken by the surface-level chaos of life. This inner peace is what leads to happiness, not the fleeting highs of achievement or praise, but the deep contentment of being aligned with your true self. And with that alignment often comes external success as well, because when you move from a place of inner clarity, your actions become intentional, focused, and inspired. You no longer waste energy chasing what is not meant for you. Instead, you create, build, and grow from your center. In this way, silence is not a retreat from life. It is preparation for living fully. It sharpens the mind, softens the heart, and strengthens the soul. And in the end, it brings us back to ourselves, not the self others expect, but the self that has been waiting patiently beneath the noise. All it ever needed was your attention and your sight. Focusing on yourself is often misunderstood in today's world. It is frequently mistaken for selfishness, egoism or isolation. Why, there is a profound difference between being selfish and becoming self-aware. When you focus on yourself with the intention of healing, understanding, and growth, you are not turning away from others, you are turning inward to rediscover where strength and peace originate. This journey inward is not about building walls, but about removing the false layers that have accumulated over time. The self is not something we automatically understand. It is something we must intentionally come to know, and that knowing requires focus. When your energy is constantly directed outwards toward pleasing others, meeting external expectations, slowly the authentic self gets buried beneath those masks and obligations. But when you deliberately shift your focus inward, the dynamic changes completely. You begin to ask different questions. Instead of, what do they think of me? You ask, what do I think of myself? Instead of chasing what seems impressive or acceptable, you ask, what truly resonates with me? This is not unselfishness, this is soulful. It is the sacred act of taking responsibility for your life, your choices, and your path. When you focus on yourself in this way, you begin to notice what truly nourishes you and what drains you. You become more attuned to the environment, people, and habits that either support or sabotage your well-being. And with that awareness, you start making choices that are rooted in self-respect. You stop trying to prove your worth because you begin to feel it. You stop over-explaining yourself because your inner validation becomes stronger than the need for external approval. This inward focus is also essential for healing. Many people walk through life carrying unprocessed wounds, emotional, psychological, even spiritual. These wounds don't heal on their own, and they certainly aren't healed by staying busy or distracted. They require attention. This process may be painful at times, but it is also liberating. Each layer of healing brings you closer to your real self. Another powerful outcome of focusing on yourself is the discovery of your inner gifts. When you are not consumed by the noise of the outside world, you begin to hear the whispers of your potential. Talents, ideas, passions, what once seemed like a fantasy becomes a real possibility. This is how self-focus leads to true empowerment. You become the author of your life story, rather than a character in someone else's script. You live with greater intention, greater clarity, and greater joy. And ironically, by focusing on yourself in this deep, authentic way, you actually become more capable of serving others. Because you are no longer giving from emptiness, you are giving from overflow. So focusing on yourself isn't withdrawal, it's renewal. It is a return to the place where your power lives, where your truth resides, and where your joy is born. In honoring yourself, in a society that thrives on validation and external recognition, the quest for authenticity can feel like swimming against the current. From an early age, we are conditioned to perform, to meet expectations, to blend in, to gain approval. We learn to measure our worth by how others see us, the praise we receive, the applause we earn, the roles we play. Slowly become actors on a stage that isn't even ours. We wear masks, not because we want to deceive, but because we fear being unseen, unloved, or misunderstood. Yet no performance, no matter how flawless, can bring the peace that comes from simply being yourself. Authenticity begins where approval ends. It requires the courage to strip away layers of conditioning and stand firmly in your truth. Not the truth handed to you by others, but the one discovered within. When you stop seeking to please everyone, you begin to meet the person you truly are. And that is where real freedom begins, in the refusal to live a life that is not your own. The desire for approval is powerful, but it is also a trap. It keeps you dependent on feedback that fluctuates with trends, moods, and projections. One day you're celebrated, the next you're criticized. If your identity is tied to these highs and lows, your sense of self will constantly be at risk. But when you ground yourself in authenticity, you are no longer swayed by external judgment. You begin to live from a place of deep inner positivity. You no longer ask, will they like me? Instead you ask, is this true for me? This shift is not easy. It often involves letting go of identities that once made you feel safe. It may mean disappointing people who thought they knew who you were. It might even mean walking away from environments that rewarded your performance but never embraced your essence. But every step away from false approval is a step toward inner peace. You begin to feel lighter, freer, more alive. Because nothing is more exhausting than constantly editing yourself to be acceptable, and nothing is more empowering than standing in your unfiltered truth. Living authentically does not mean rejecting all feedback or shutting yourself off from the world. It means filtering input through the lens of your own values and self-knowledge. You listen, but you do not blindly follow. You remain open, but not impressionable. And ironically, the more authentic you become, the more magnetic you are to others. Not because you're trying to impress, but because authenticity resonates. It inspires others to drop their own masks, to speak their own truths, to live more fully. Your courage gives others permission to be real too. True happiness does not come from applause. It comes from alignment. When your actions match your values, when your words reflect your truth, and when your choices honor your spirit, you feel at peace. That peace is not loud or flashy. It is quiet, steady, and deeply fulfilling. And from that place of inner harmony, you find not only joy, but the confidence to live boldly. Authenticity is not a destination. It is a daily practice, a choice to return to yourself again and again. In doing so, you reclaim your power, your voice, and your life. Wealth is often misunderstood, most associated solely with material possessions, money, status, luxury, but this is only a surface-level understanding. True wealth begins within. It is the state of inner abundance, peace, and alignment with one's authentic self. A person who is deeply connected to who they are, who understands their values, and who walks in harmony with their inner truth. This kind of wealth cannot be taken away by market crashes or external failures. It does not depend on status or recognition. It is a richness that comes from living a life of meaning and purpose. When your inner world is in order, everything outside you starts to reflect that balance. Clarity replaces confusion. Decisions become easier because they are guided by your values rather than external pressure. You stop being reactive to life's chaos and instead respond with calm, confidence, and intention. This is the beginning of true success, the kind that is sustainable, fulfilling, and deeply personal. Living in internal alignment means your thoughts, emotions, actions, and desires are not in conflict with one another. There is a coherence, a unity. that forms the foundation of real joy and fulfillment. You no longer chase things that are meaningless to your soul, no longer waste energy on proving your worth. Instead, you channel your energy into creation, growth, and contribution. The world may see these outcomes as success or prosperity, but for you, they are simply a reflection of your inner alignment. This kind of wealth is not visible to everyone. It might not involve luxury cars or high-end and fashion. It may not be glamorous in the conventional sense, but it is unmistakable in its presence. People who possess inner wealth carry themselves differently. They move with purpose, they speak with clarity. They radiate a kind of calm strength that cannot be faked or imitated. When you begin to live from this place, you attract the right opportunities, not because you're lucky, but because you're aligned. Your actions are clear, your vision is focused. Inner wealth also brings emotional and mental freedom. You are no longer imprisoned by fear, insecurity, or the opinions of others. You are free to make bold choices, to take risks, to walk away from what doesn't serve you. And in this freedom, creativity flourishes, ideas come more easily, work becomes more meaningful, even your relationship with money changes. It becomes a tool, not a master. You manage it with wisdom, not desperation. Moreover, this inner wealth enhances your capacity to love, to give, and to uplift others. Because you are not operating from a place of lack, you do not see others as threats or competitors. You see them as fellow travelers. You can celebrate their success without feeling diminished. In this way, inner alignment leads not only to happiness, but to a form of prosperity that touches every area of your life, your health, relationships, creativity, and finances. The outer world begins to mirror the richness you've cultivated within. And this is the wealth. To be truly wealthy is to be whole within yourself. It is to know what matters, to live from that knowing, and to build a life that reflects your truth. This is the wealth that no one can give you and no one can take away. It is yours to create, and it begins. Silence has long been misunderstood as weakness or passivity, yet in its purest form, silence is a powerful expression of inner strength. In a world obsessed with noise, speed, and constant communication, choosing to be silent is often seen as doing nothing. But silence is far from nothing. It is a distinction. In silence, there is restraint, reflection, and above all, mastery. When you remain silent in moments where noise is expected, you become different. You are no longer a part of the emotional chaos that others feed on. You no longer feel compelled to speak just to be heard or to prove a point. Silence becomes a statement in itself. Staying silent allows space for observation, while others are quick to react, to argue, or to defend. Silence gives you the opportunity to see the situation clearly. You learn to watch rather than participate. That awareness gives you power, not over others, but over yourself. There is also deep healing in silence. Words can distract us from pain. They can cover wounds that need to breathe in order to heal. In silence, suppressed feelings rise. The truth you've been avoiding emerges, and though that truth can sometimes be uncomfortable, it is necessary for growth. Silence is the container that allows emotional clarity. You begin to name what you feel. You begin to hear the voices within you, the fears, the hopes, the dreams, the griefs, and as you listen, you begin to understand yourself. Furthermore, silence builds emotional discipline. In a heated moment, anyone can shout, anyone can argue, insult, or lash out. But it takes true strength to stay calm, to choose stillness over retaliation. This does not mean allowing others to walk over you. People begin to listen, not because you talk often, but because you talk with meaning. Silence is also the birthplace of wisdom. When you quiet the outer world, you begin to access the inner world more fully. There is a stillness that comes with silence that the world cannot offer. It is a peace that arises not from circumstances, but from within. In that stillness, you begin to discover your boundaries, your desires, and your truth. You no longer say yes when you mean no, you begin rooted in being aware. Eventually, silence becomes your power. It allows you to move through the world with grace rather than aggression, with insight, and the more you practice it, the more confident you become in your own presence. You stop needing to explain, defend, or argue. You simply live in alignment and let your energy speak for itself. In a world that is always trying to make you louder, choosing silence is a revolutionary act. It is the sign of someone who knows who they are, where they stand, and what they are worth. It is not the absence of power, but its purest form. The journey toward true power does not begin with controlling others. It begins with understanding yourself. Self-acknowledge is the foundation of all inner strengths. Without it, you are easily influenced, easily shaken, and easily lost. With it, you become centered, resilient, and purposeful. When you know who you are, your patterns, your fears, your desires, your wounds, you stop being a mystery to yourself. You begin to live, not by accident, but by design. Most people go through life wearing masks, not only for others, but even for themselves. They don't stop to ask, why do I react this way? Why does this keep happening to me? What am I truly seeking? They operate from unconscious drives, repeating patterns that lead to frustration, disappointment, or emptiness. Self-knowledge requires brutal honesty and deep compassion. You integrate them. You grow from them. You become whole. This inner wholeness becomes your greatest source of strength. You are no longer dependent on the world to tell you who you are. You do not need constant validation because you validate yourself. You do not seek constant distraction because you are not afraid to be alone with your thoughts. You know your values, your principles. You act rather than react. And that is the essence of personal power. When you know yourself deeply, you also gain emotional freedom. You can recognize when fear is speaking, and you can choose not to listen. You can tell when ego is leading, and you can return to humility. You understand your emotional triggers, and rather than letting them control you, you learn from them. This does not make you emotionless, it makes you emotionally intelligent. You become a master of your inner world rather than a prisoner to it. Self-knowledge also leads to better relationships. When you understand your needs, boundaries, and wounds, you stop expecting others to fix or complete you. You come to relationships whole, not empty. You can love without losing yourself. You can give without resentment. You can communicate clearly, listen deeply, and walk away peacefully when necessary. You stop repeating cycles of dysfunction because you've learned the lesson hidden within them. From this place of deep inner understanding, your confidence grows, not a loud, boastful confidence, but a quiet, unshakable one. You no longer need to prove yourself, because you know yourself. You do not fear rejection, because you don't reject your own truth. You live in alignment with who you really are, and that authenticity becomes your greatest strength. It is visible not in what you say, but in how you decide. True power does not come from dominating others, winning arguments, or gaining status. It comes from knowing yourself so deeply that nothing outside of you can shake the foundation you've built within. That kind of power is rare. It is earned through solitude, reflection, and truth. But once it is yours, no one can take it from you, because it does not live in the hands of others. It lives in the core of your being. From that place you can build a life of peace, purpose, and unshakable strength.